You're about to see how over $500 million vanished from a central bank in the middle of a war with zero resistance. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, the nation's central bank was hit by a massive physical cash withdrawal, authorized by a simple handwritten note linked directly to Saddam Hussein. But here's the problem. This wasn't a traditional robbery. No hackers, no explosions, no gunfights. So how do you take hundreds of millions from a central bank without being stopped? Think about it. This was one of the most protected institutions in the country during a war where cash is power. Yet it happened, and most of that money simply disappeared. Baghdad, 2003. The country is collapsing. The government is losing control. In the middle of this chaos, a single direct order authorizes the immediate withdrawal of a fortune. But was it really a heist, or something far more complex? Nothing makes sense. There wasn't enough security, no proper verification. No one even questioned it. This wasn't digital, it was physical cash. Boxes and crates of bills being loaded and transported in broad daylight, without interruption, without anyone saying stop. It happened hours before the fall of Baghdad. The system was broken, but still functioning enough to allow this. That's the danger. A vulnerable system exploited at the perfect moment. If you were there, would you have noticed? Or would you have just followed orders like everyone else? Ordinary employees followed instructions, never grasping the scale of what was happening. It wasn't fast. It wasn't silent. It was slow enough for anyone to stop it. But no one did. Why? That's the question no one answers. The most impressive part isn't the heist itself, it's that it actually worked. Was this the greatest robbery in history, or just the best execution within a collapsing system? The answer begins long before the money left the bank, long before the war arrived. It starts with a system that looked strong, but was already hollowed out from the inside. And that's what we are dismantling right now. The system was already broken before the heist. Let me show you what actually made this heist possible. It didn't start inside the bank. It started long before the money was moved or the orders were written. It started with the collapse of an entire nation. Iraq, 2003. The war was already underway. U.S. forces were advancing. Saddam Hussein's regime was losing control. But here is the critical point. The system still existed, but it no longer functioned. Think about that. Institutions were open, employees were present, processes were active, but there was no real authority. What happens to a system when authority vanishes but the structure remains? It becomes a hollow shell, and that is exactly what Iraq was experiencing. The central bank was still operating, but who was really in charge? No one knew. This creates a lethal situation. Rules exist, but no one guarantees they'll be followed. In a central bank, every decision requires multiple validations, but in that moment, there was no validation, no functional hierarchy, no time, and above all, no trust. Fear had already taken over. Employees didn't know whether to obey orders or run. They didn't know who still held power or who had lost it. This changes human behavior. In scenarios like this, people don't question, they obey, even without understanding. Imagine a formal, urgent order arriving while the government is falling and war is at the doorstep. Would you question it, or would you just execute? This heist didn't start with action. It started with context. A functional system verifies orders and analyzes risks. But here, none of that existed anymore. Communication failed. Hierarchy was a mess. Authority was questionable. And in the middle of it all, an absurd opportunity. Because when a system breaks, someone always notices before everyone else. And whoever notices first dominates the game. But this wasn't a random group or pure chaos. There was direction. There was intent. If someone issues an order and no one questions it, power has already changed hands, even if no one realizes it yet. The system was standing, but control had vanished, creating a short but powerful window where any decision could be executed without resistance. How many massive operations in history only happened because the system failed first? This isn't an isolated case, it's a pattern. And whoever understands this pattern can predict where the next failure will happen. But here, the mistake had already been made. The system was exposed. Someone noticed. And in the next moment, that opportunity turns into real action. By the time the decision to act is made, it's already too late to stop it. Do you think this only happens in war-torn countries, or can it happen in any weakened system? Comment below. I want to know what you think. And if you want to understand how these operations work from the inside, subscribe, because what comes next is where everything truly escalates. The decision that turned chaos into opportunity. Now, everything changes. You've seen the landscape, a country collapsing, a system out of control, and people operating without knowing who was truly in charge. But there is one specific moment where someone decides to act. That decision transforms vulnerability into an operation. In the middle of that chaos, an order emerges. Not a complex plan, not an elaborate invasion, just an order. Direct, written, no room for interpretation. And here is the most dangerous detail of all. This order was linked directly to Saddam Hussein's inner circle. If you're inside the central bank, in the middle of a war, and you receive an order from the nation's leader, do you question it or do you execute? At that moment, questioning wasn't just a career move, it was a survival choice. And that's where the game flips. This order didn't ask for access, it authorized a withdrawal. Real cash, extreme volume, no clear limit. Pay attention to this. It wasn't done in secret, it wasn't hidden or disguised, it was treated as legitimate. That changes the entire level of the operation. Imagine the scene, employees opening access, doors being unlocked, vaults being entered, everything following a flow that seemed normal, but it was completely out of control. How many people there knew this wasn't right? Probably many, but here is the decisive factor. No one had the authority to stop it, and when no one can stop it, it keeps going. What was once just an order now becomes physical execution. The real scale begins to show. We are talking about a digital transfer. We're talking about crates being stacked, cash being moved, trucks being loaded, all in real time. How long do you think it takes to withdraw hundreds of millions in physical cash? Minutes? Hours? Days? Here's the point. This wasn't instantaneous. It was a process, long enough for someone to notice, long enough for someone to react. But no one did. The operation didn't depend on hiding, it depended on acceptance. It wasn't extreme genius or advanced tech, it was something far more dangerous, understanding exactly when the system couldn't react and using that. Was this a heist or a perfectly timed authorized withdrawal? In the next moment, that line disappears completely, and what seemed controlled becomes impossible to contain. The operation happens in broad daylight. Now there's no more theory. The order is accepted, access is granted, the operation begins. Inside the central bank of Iraq, vaults are opened, not by force, not under direct threat, but by authorization, and that is what makes it so absurd. Imagine the scene, employees moving fast, crates being brought in, cash being counted, sorted, and stacked. It all looks like a standard internal procedure, but it wasn't. How much physical cash fits inside a central bank? Millions? Hundreds of millions. Now think about the physical volume. We aren't talking about digital numbers here. We're talking about weight. Bills take up space. They need to be carried. They require logistics. And that's where the real scale appears. Pay attention to this detail. Trucks begin to pull up. Yes, trucks, because there is no other way to transport this much physical currency. And while this is happening, no one interferes, no one blocks the way, no one asks a single question. At what point should this have been stopped? At the order? When the vaults opened? During the loading? Every one of those moments existed, and yet nothing happened. The more time passes, the more irreversible the operation becomes. Every crate removed, every truck loaded, every passing minute, any chance of control vanishes. Here is the most critical part. There was no containment plan, no active protocol, no organized response. The system simply did not react. If you were standing outside, watching trucks loaded with cash drive away, would you realize what was happening, or would you assume it was an official government operation? That is the key. The operation hid behind something extremely powerful, the appearance of normality. That is what allowed it to succeed until the very end. By the time the last truck leaves and the final crates exit the bank, it's already too late. There is no more control, no immediate reversal. There is only one question left. How much of this money can still be recovered? What happened there wasn't just a successful execution. It was an operation that was impossible to interrupt. Tell me, at what point do you think this heist could have been stopped? At the order, during the execution, or was it too late from the very start? Comment below. I want to see your analysis. And if you want to know what happened to that money afterward, subscribe, because the end of this story is even stranger. The money vanished, and the truth got stranger. When it all ended, when the trucks were gone and the bank stood empty, the money simply vanished. No clear tracking, no immediate control, no quick response. Think about that. We are talking about over $500 million in physical cash. How does something that size just disappear? Here is the point that closes it all. Some of the money was found, but only a fraction. Millions were later recovered, hidden in strategic locations within the territory, but the rest, it never surfaced. That changes the entire weight of this case. It's no longer just about how the heist happened, it's about what happened next. Let me ask you, was this money lost or strategically redistributed? When you analyze the context, nothing seems random. The withdrawal was organized, the transport was structured, the timing was perfect. So why would the final destination be chaotic? It doesn't make sense. There is another layer here. This heist was only possible because the system ceased to exist. It wasn't just a failure, it wasn't just an opportunity. It was the exact moment where authority disappeared, control evaporated, and decisions stopped being questioned. That is what connects everything. Remember the initial question? Was this a heist or something authorized at the right moment? The answer is uncomfortable because it was both. A collapsed system, an executed order, and an operation that exploited that exact gap. How many systems today look stable but are already vulnerable inside? How many institutions still function but have already lost real control? And more importantly, who notices first? History shows a clear pattern. Great operations don't start with genius. They start with fragility and someone observant enough to see it before everyone else. Hold on to this final thought. The biggest mistake wasn't that the heist happened. It's that no one could stop it. When a system reaches that point, the problem isn't the criminal, it's the system itself. If this kind of operation makes you realize how the world truly works behind the structures, click the video appearing on the screen right now, because the next case shows another system that also seemed impossible to break until someone proved otherwise.